Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the events in the world of Scientology as covered on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back home, Chris, after some time on the road.
Yeah, and guess we got some stuff wrapping up the Olympics this week and some interesting Scientology fodder to sort of consider here this week. Some inside stuff too. First off, though, there was a sort of adjacent story. This comic author Ron Kassman
Oh.
and his newest book, graphic novel, you could say comic, has to do with cults. And you wrote about this. What was this story, and what was it? Why'd you pick this up?
Right. Well, Ron Kasman is a longtime member of the underground bunker community. He's one of the most well-known comic artists in Canada. He's been nominated for the highest comics artist award there. He already has a couple of books, to his name, and he wanted me to know that his new one, he thinks is the best one he's ever done. He's really decided to go back and explore what things like Scientology were like in the 70s and stuff, and what a different sort of countercultural
Yeah.
period it was. But it's not Scientology. He's saying I'm not writing a book about Scientology. He wants instead he invented his own group, and he just wants to immerse people in what it was like to get sucked into a group like that, and how easy it is to get sucked in, and the things, what does it answer in your life? What are the things that draw you in? And he sent me some sample pages. They look great. He invented a character who's kind of the Werner Erhard, L. Ron Hubbard mashup. And I think it's going to be wonderful. It'll be out before Christmas. And I just thought I would let people know it was coming.
Awesome. I'm excited by it. And of course I would be, being, Mr. Cult guy. But but really for that reason, and also because there is such a, well, it is a different world than it was in the 70s. And the culture was different. Encounter groups, this going and confronting your fears in a public arena with, Warner Earhart's Est and some Scientology stuff and other cults. This was a thriving time for this kind of thing. So I'm excited to see that put graphically, because it doesn't get, there's not a lot of entertainment around that particular thing with cults and stuff. So it was nice to see that. Also, that same day, you also had another nugget having to do with an update on our man in prison, L. Ron Hubbard 2.0.
All right. Well, he's in jail. He's not in prison yet, Chris. But yeah, August 2nd, he had another court date. And once again, his pretrial just got pushed off to later in the month. And so I wanted to update the readers. I know they're curious about him. And I had another message that he gave to his followers. And those are always interesting to see what he's thinking. This one was a little over the top. I wanted to get your thoughts on it because he was talking about, like, he was literally saying, like, I'm wondering what people will pay for immortality, you know. Like a guy sitting in jail is going to be able to offer you immortality. Or he was talking about going exterior with full perception, which is kind of the Scientology ultimate goal. And it's just interesting to me to see this guy pushing people, trying to see what they'll pay, see what they, while he's sitting in jail awaiting trial on some very serious violent charges, and could end up going to prison for quite a while. So I don't know. What did you think about the things he was sort of like offering people? Quite a list of things, wasn't it?
It was, and it was generalized enough and broad enough that it was very Hubbardarian, if put it that way, right? It was very much like L. Ron Hubbard. He has a knack for, this guy Justin Craig, the real guy here, has a real knack for picking up Hubbard's rhythm, and that's the best way I can put it as far as how he uses his words, chooses his words, because obviously we're reading, his written text messages to his people. And so I don't know what he sounds like, if he ever lectures to these people or records anything for them.
He
But
has.
writing is, it's good. He's really good at what he is doing. And I had to also, not only is he offering them things, he's doing it exactly the way Hubbard would do, where it's always the overpromise, but it's right around the corner. It's coming. Where I'm researching, and that he admits that it wasn't achieved yet. There's enough. Hey, look, I know, right? We're not there yet, but look, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I swear. And that's a very different line from I am the, magnificent L. Ron Hubbard return to take over the church kind of thing, like a Miscavige would be. It's a different thing. It's a no, I didn't really make it, but we're going to now. So it kind of keeps that research thing of Hubbard going.
Yeah,
If that,
you remind me something he does that's very much like L. Ron Hubbard is he talks about how, the real goal they want is going exterior with perception, be able to
yep,
leave your body, and we're gonna get there. And then he says, of course, the other stuff is real easy, like power and
right.
what power and wealth and all that.
That's
That's
right.
that's no problem. And that's
That's right.
exactly the way Hubbard would talk. Is he would talk about how creating things out of thin air. Well, we do that all the time. It's no big deal. And you're like, well, then demonstrate it. Oh no. I don't know. It's a particular parlor trick that he did where he would just, I think he would make people feel like, well, I'm not seeing anything like that happening, but make it feel like that's your problem, not
Right.
his. Because for him, it's all easy. And I can see Elron, and just for those few that aren't sure what we're talking about, Justin Craig, California ex-convict, joined up with some independent Scientologists. These are people who have left Scientology but continue to do the L. Ron Hubbard technology outside of the church. Hooked up with some of them up from the state of Washington, and told them that he was the reincarnated L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard. He legally changed his name to Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. He's in jail now in Tennessee under that name. And like I said, he's facing some very serious violent charges and drug selling charges. And he's been in jail in Tennessee since October 2021. So coming up on 3 years, he's been awaiting trial. And there are still people who send him money every month, and he's trying to consider how much more he can get out of them. So it's just an amazing sort of independent Scientology. And I don't want to say that all indies are into this guy. It's a
No,
subset of a subset,
that's right.
but definitely there are people that think he's the genuine article, and I guess some of them think he's going to take them to the promised land where they can leave their body at will.
Yeah, I tell you, all I can say is obviously, in wrap up. I mean, obviously, we're saying there's a con going on here, and I'm saying as a former Scientologist, the guy is good at what he's doing.
Yeah,
He is. He's
yeah.
taking some time. Now this comes up, but now we're getting John Travolta leaving Scientology stories. Uh,
Ever since Kelly Preston died, there have been a lot of stories in tabloids about how this has somehow soured John Travolta on Scientology and that he's leaving. It's always put down to unnamed sources. There's never any evidence of it. And the most recent one, I didn't want to pick on Radar in particular, but they were just the most recent one who were pointing to the fact that he's selling a house in Clearwater, which they've been doing for a few years. I don't know that that house was ever all that important to them. John lives in Ocala, Florida. That's where his planes are. That he's been based there for forever. That's like 100 miles north of Clearwater. So the fact that he had a house in Clearwater that was purchased by the family trust his sister runs, by the way, I don't think it's that big a deal. But I'm less interested in that, in the claim that's always made, and it was in this story, some unnamed person saying, well, he's really moving away from Scientology now, and I was like, where do you get that? Because okay, you could go ahead and quote an unnamed person saying that, but how does a newspaper, even a tabloid, not point out to the counter evidence, which is these photographs we've found showing that John Travolta was in attendance at both the 2023 and 2024 L. Ron Hubbard birthday events in Clearwater. In 2023, because of the pandemic, it was held at the Fort Harrison Hotel Auditorium. smaller venue, but he was there. And this year in March, just a few months ago, that event returned to Ruth Eckerd Hall in Clearwater, and we found a photograph in Scientology's own press release that showed John Travolta in the front row giving David Miscavige a standing ovation, along with a very pregnant Elizabeth Moss next to him.
Yeah.
So, look, go ahead and say you've got unnamed people saying he's unhappy with Scientology, but I think how can a journalistic organization not do the most basic research and show, hey, but he might be leaving, but he was there in the front row for David Miscavige just a few months ago. I mean, that's just hard, irrefutable evidence. Travolta is still dedicated to Dave. And same thing for Tom Cruise. I mean, when Tom Cruise showed up in his helicopter at the IAS gala, once it returned to St. Hill this year, that has tended to shut up some of these tabs a little bit. I'm still seeing stories. Like there was a story after that, after Tom showed up at the St. Hill thing in England in November. After that, I saw tabloids saying, "Well, he's not been coming to Los Angeles. Maybe he's leaving Scientology." He was at the St. Hill headquarters with his buddy David Miscavige. So I don't know. I just want to try to hold these publications at least to a little bit of a standard and say, listen, you've got to at least point out that Travolta has been showing up to these things. That's all. I know some people think I'm wasting my time. Why try to correct the tabloids? But I just, the fact that John Travolta and Tom Cruise are showing up for David Miscavige is a very important part of why Scientology's still in business, right,
Right.
Chris?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've said this many times to people on and off camera is those two celebrities, those two in particular, have been the number one reason why celebrity media keeps its focus on Scientology because of those two, and why the public at large still hear the word Scientology bandied about is because Tom Cruise is literally the most famous celebrity on the planet, period, end of story. So, of course, you're going to hear about the thing he likes to talk about. And for a while, he really liked to talk about that. Same with John Travolta. He's active, practicing, proud on every movie set, everywhere he goes, Scientology, Scientology, Scientology. And if people knew the significance of the fact that them being in the front row of these events means that they are tighter than ever with the church, that they would never be allowed to be anywhere near David Miscavige or be on the front row if their loyalty was at all in question.
Good point.
That's the kind of organization this is.
Yeah.
Those e-meters, that's how they run things in that group. So I think what I did want to say, though, is on the side of the tabloids or whatever, is I think the reason this also lasts or has legs all the time is because it's hope. People want this to happen. They want these guys out of Scientology.
I know, but I know, but what you always run into are people that assume John Travolta and Tom Cruise are only in it because they're being blackmailed, and it's just not true.
Nope,
John Travolta believes that L. Ron Hubbard is responsible for every bit of his success. Tom Cruise really believes David Miscavige is the most important human being on the planet.
Yep.
I know it's hard for people to accept, but they are true believers. That's why they keep showing up, not because they're afraid not to.
Is exactly right. That is exactly right. And having literally met John, know about him, know about his history in Scientology, knew when he was on the rocks a long time ago, that ain't who he is and what he's doing now. So okay, now this next one was pretty interesting, even for me, because I got to see some stuff I hadn't seen before in an article you published about L. Ron Hubbard and his, shall we say, infamous mission into time. Do you want to break this down for everybody?
Sure. So there's a book called Mission into Time. I think you're familiar with it. I know it pretty well too. When L. Ron Hubbard had to leave the U.S. because things were getting too hot for him with the government there. Went to England, had several really successful years in the mid '60s, but then the government started getting hot for him there too. So then he took to sea.
Yep.
He created this thing called the Sea Organization with some ships. And one of the first things he did early on was he went on this special mission. He wanted to test the whole idea of a whole track recall. because he believed he lived in ancient times. Like all Scientologists, they believe that they've lived countless times, and that he could remember specific locations in the Mediterranean in ancient times. And so the idea was they're going to sail there. He's going to describe some places, and then his Sea Org crew are going to go ashore and see if Ron isn't right about things. Very famous trip that he took, and again, it produced this little book called Mission at a Time. Well, when he came back from that trip, the first thing he did was give a lecture about it to a bunch of Sea Org employees, and some of them were on, Hannah Eltringham, Hannah Whitfield, and Yvonne Jench, for example. He called on them to verify what he was saying. And what Val Ross was talking to me about was that a transcript of that lecture. And I thought it was fascinating. And I just wanted people to imagine you're a Sea Org person. You're in that audience. Ron has come back. He's got these Sea Org staff backing him up. And they're telling you that, yeah, Ron remembered that this temple in Sardinia, it actually had this secret back door. And so we went to the ruins, and sure enough, there it was. There's this thing that Ron was talking about. And apparently, and then according to his lecture, he like used clay to model some of these ruins and stuff so they could find these things. I mean, I was of two minds, Chris, but I really want to get your thoughts. On the one hand, I can see why the people in that room were dazzled, fascinated, thought this was a fantastic confirmation of whole track recall. On the other hand, if you just, I don't have a recording of it, I can't hear his tone of voice, but just reading the transcript, he is such a performer. Like always, he's just cracking jokes, and he's demeaning archaeologists. I just find it fascinating and hilarious. So, I mean, my readers were very skeptical about it. How did it read for you as somebody that was in that organization?
In a lot of different ways. I got to say, it was a little treat reading this thing from the perspective I have now. Because I could write a paper on this thing. Hubbard was in so many different places doing so many different things throughout the course of this lecture, from invalidating modern science and raising himself up above it by criticizing it the way that he did, even though his criticisms were empty and even vapidly stupid. But that's he's speaking to an audience of people who are true believers, and remember, these are people who want to believe what he is saying. Right. And I thought that there was something here that was really interesting, because this is in the year period at the formation of the Sea Org, when it's still the Sea Project thing, when it's not uniforms and yes sir, no sir, how high sir, and they need people, and this is almost, I wonder if in a way this isn't a little bit of a recruitment event, in a way of like for Scientologists, we would live on OT phenomena. And here is OT phenomena being delivered to you by the guru himself, in his own words. And here are 4 people through the course of this lecture standing up and saying, yep, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
I mean, that is as magical an experience and confirmation of it as Scientologists ever get to.
Yeah.
And that's the power that was being used or thrown around there by Hubbard.
Yeah.
And so in that way, pretty genius.
Yeah.
And I think I think y'all would, if you go through that lecture, I think you'll see from what I just said, check it out now and see what you think, what he's doing there. It's crafty. It's not just off.
Yeah. He always wanted to put doctors out of business. And in this, he was trying to put archaeologists out of business, because what's the point? What's the point of digging up an old ruin when you can just remember what it was like when you were there?
Exactly.
2,000 years earlier.
That's right. And pay attention how he looks like he's saying something specific and historical when his statements are, it's like a warm, cold psychic reading thing. It's like they're using words that you think he's saying one thing, but when you really parse it down, hey, wait a minute, this guy's not saying anything at all. All right. So a very, very interesting, insightful article that day. And Also, then there was this other article or this story about the OT levels, OT drug rundown. What was this about?
Oh yeah, so Alex Barnes Ross and I both have a real interest in some of the London staff because they're kind of different. You remember last week we talked about Alex's really great piece about how he had helped the London staff there develop a social media strategy when the rest of Scientology doesn't really do that at all. This week we found that Sandrine Mutu Hall, I guess is her married name, has now reached a new level. She's a very interesting member of that staff. She's been very visible, and she celebrated OT3 a few months ago, and now she celebrated OT4. And of course, I love talking about OT4. I've written about it before when I realized that Greta Van Susteren and her husband John P. Cole are both OT4. And I know OT3 gets all the press because of Xenu, but OT4 is amazing because on OT3, you discover L. Ron Hubbard reveals to you that you're not just a thetan in a body, but there are all these attached or hovering around you, invisible other thetans called body thetans that are left over from these genocides from millions of years ago, and they're angry and they're confused, and you have to spend weeks then and months figuring out where they are, convincing them to go away, calming them down or whatever. And it's just, seriously, you're counseling unseen alien entities that are attached to you. That's what upper level Scientology is. And you supposedly drive them all away. Well, then what happens in OT4? You realize there's even more of them. And the reason that you couldn't see them before is that they're in really bad shape. They're basically all junkies, and you've got to rehab them all and dry them out. And so it's basically a kind of rehab that you're doing at this upper OT level. And okay, but what about the Scientologist that doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs? Why do you have to go through that? L. Ron Hubbard is ready for that. He says, even if the person says they don't drink in this lifetime, those body thetans are maybe suffering from binges they did in another part of the galaxy billions of years ago. And
Yeah.
who knows what kind of space coke they had then. So now you're spending hundreds of dollars an hour to get, well, you're doing it at home, but you're trying to reach these, junky body thetans and get their histories and rehab them and dry them out.
Yep.
And I of course I think it's very funny, but it's not so funny when you think about the fact. And good for you, Sandrine. You've now passed that level, but it's not so funny when you think about Greta Van Susteren because okay, Greta has literally been through a level of Scientology where she is taught that she has the power to rehab unseen entities, and gives you this incredible, well, wouldn't that be useful in real life? Why isn't she talking about it? If she's able to rehab somebody without even being able to see them, doesn't shouldn't that be something she discusses on her news programs? Anyway, I know the answer to that, obviously, but I just find OT4 fascinating. So the fact that Sandrine did it, I got some fun quotes from Alex about it because he actually knew those staffers there. But I always enjoy an opportunity to talk about OT4 because I just think it's incredible that this is the kind of thing Scientology offers, and they won't talk about. They
Wow.
will not tell you about it. Yeah.
No, this is all super, super hush hush. The only thing I can add to that is that if you're right. All the press goes to Xenu and the genocide and the volcanoes because it sounds absolutely batshit, because it is. But the consequences of it for Scientologists, something I try to stress often when I talk about this, is Xenu isn't what's important about that for Scientologists. They don't care. That story isn't the revelatory, oh my God, it's the body thetans. That's what's important about that level and every level after. And
Right.
for OT3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are
Yep.
all about the body thetans.
Right.
And it's not all one monolithic way of dealing with the body thetans. You go this way, and then you go this way, and then you go in this way. And there's 10 different ways of dealing with them on OT7. So, or whatever, whatever there is. Each one of them, by the way, and we talked about this in one of my shows last year, each one of them making the Scientologist more and more narcissistic.
Yeah.
Because the Scientologist believes they are more and more responsible for things happening way outside of themselves, not just what they're doing, because of the nature of the way the auditing works. So it is messing with their heads in very significant ways at these high levels.
Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, worth commenting on,
Yeah.
Yeah, nasty stuff. Finally, we have our big Olympic event. Okay, so Tom Cruise, the Olympics, Karen Bass. What's the story here?
Yeah, so I just watched this and it came off almost the way I had predicted. It was a little different, but at the end of an Olympics, they hand off the Olympic flag to the next city, and the next city to host the Summer Olympics will be Los Angeles in 2028. So the tradition would be for the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, to hand over the Olympic flag to the mayor of the next city, Los Angeles, who's Karen Bass. And that occurred tonight in the ceremony. The only thing that was a little I forgot about is that Anne Hidalgo handed the flag to the IOC president, who then handed it to Karen Bass. Karen Bass then walked over to a different part of the stage next to Simone Biles, handed the flag to Simone Biles, and the two of them stood there as the American national anthem was played. Then came the big moment that we'd all heard was coming. Tom Cruise was up on top of the stadium, jumped off the top and rappelled down to the floor, disconnected the rope, and then started walking through the athletes, and they're all high-fiving him and stuff. He got to the stage, he came up, he greeted Karen Bass, then also greeted Simone Biles, took the Olympic flag from her, went to a waiting motorcycle, stuck it in the back, and drove out of the stadium. And then they rolled the pre-recorded footage of him skydiving to LA and all this stuff. But so it's slightly different than I had wondered about. He didn't like take the flag from Karen Bass, but he greeted her and then took it from Simone Biles. But the point is the same. Karen Bass was complicit in this little play act involving Scientology's biggest celebrity. And the reason that's significant is that Karen Bass, when we thought she might be being considered by Joe Biden as a VP running mate, footage resurfaced of her giving a speech at a Scientology Ideal Org back in 2010 in Los Angeles. She admitted that was a mistake. She denounced Scientology. When she was running for mayor in 2022, it became a little bit of a contest between her and Rick Caruso over who could denounce Scientology more. Because she knew she had that terrible footage in her background where she was, praising Scientology. And David Miscavige, leader of Scientology, was so freaked out by the two mayoral candidates outdoing each other on slamming Scientology that he ran this multi-million-dollar media campaign swamping TV outlets in Los Angeles with these ridiculous commercials about Scientology.
Yeah.
Karen Bass supposedly had learned her lesson. She apparently had told Mike Rinder and Leah Remini that she was going to help them however she could, and she was educated now about Scientology. She'd never make that mistake again. And now, just 2 years later, here she is in the Stade de France, greeting Tom Cruise as he takes the Olympic flag, with Tom Cruise literally representing Los Angeles, even though he lives in England. So I don't know. I just think this raises a lot of questions she should answer.
Yeah.
I know what they're going to say. It's like, well, Tom represents Hollywood, and we need to make the 2028 Olympics all about Hollywood. It was just a show, Tony. Calm down. But no, I mean, this is why Scientology literally stays in business in order to extort people, rip apart families, force women into abortions, and all the horrible things they do because they get cover from people like Tom Cruise, who literally shows up on the biggest stage in the entire world, and somebody like Karen Bass just plays along
That's right.
because because I don't know.
That, I mean, obviously, there's the whole, does she have a choice and all that? Yeah, of course she does. We all do. And she could have said something. There could have been all kinds of things that could have happened for her to maintain her word to Mike and Leah and the rest of the city, because at the end of the day, she's not there to be part of show business. She's there to take care of the people. So we can hold her to a higher standard, and we get to do that.
Yeah.
It's not show
Well,
business.
it'll be interesting because the first and the other thing I found out this week, I mentioned him, I think I mentioned it at the blog this week, Chris, was that I know about 10 days ago TMZ broke the news that Tom Cruise was going to be part of the closing ceremonies. But it turns out that French media has been talking about it since like May. Apparently everybody in France knew that Tom Cruise was going to be part of the closing ceremony. There's only American
Yeah.
media that didn't know anything until just a couple weeks ago. So that was interesting to me,
Mhm.
but I don't know. I just think that it's a shame that there's isn't at least. Oh, so when TMZ broke it, and then all Deadline and everybody else piled on a week ago, they were all like, "What's the story? Tom Cruise does his own stunts. That's it." None of
Right.
those stories had the word Scientology in them. And
Right.
that's why, I wanted to write a story saying, hey, this is an issue because Karen Bass has passed. And I still haven't. Now, since then, there has been a bunch more media. Some French media has called it. The French reporters went to anti-cult groups who were saying, yeah, this is a disgrace. Alex Barnes Ross put up an open
Yep.
letter at his website
Yep.
complaining about it. So there has been some media about this, but I don't know if anybody is the LA Times even going to ask Karen Bass about that. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to do? Right.
And can I tell you about one more thing that happened today that was not on my blog this last week? I have a new piece in the Daily Beast. I've been working on it for months. Finally came out today. Please give it a look. It brings in a new subject about Scientology and medicine. Maybe we'll get into it. I'll have time to get into it a little bit more next week, Chris. But I
Right.
hope you get a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
I think I'm opening up a new discussion about how Scientology is about to cause real harm to hundreds of thousands of non-Scientologists. I think a lot of the focus, and understandably so, from Leah Remini to Alex Gibney to all the other, you and me, we tend to focus on the damage Scientology does to Scientologists.
Yep.
But I'm hoping that this new article I have in the Daily Beast will show how Scientology is causing real harm potentially to millions of people around the world. And it's all gone under the radar until now. So I hope everyone gives that a look.
Excellent. Okay, guys, check it out there. Also, of course, you see Tony's Substack address right there on the screen in front of you. So if you're not subscribed, check it out. Get your daily notifications and check in with us at the end of the week for the weekly summary. Tony, any other inkling of anything you wanted to say about upcoming previews?
Yeah, I have some more data about that subject that in the Daily Beast piece that I did not fit in that particular article. I've got some Kendrick Moxon stuff I want to bring out about that. So look for that this week.
Oh boy, our favorite in-house Scientology attorney. Okay, folks, check it out. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.